Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, everybody. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on bio just because there's a lot of great candidates in the race with lots of great bios, but I'm just going to let you know a little bit about myself so you kind of have a understanding of me and you hear it directly from me. I grew up incredibly poor. Federal definition of poverty. We didn't have health insurance. We didn't have a working car for nearly half my childhood. Um, we lived paycheck to paycheck, and at 18 years old, I was 100% self-supportive, and I went to Texas A&M University, where I had to, take out student loans to pay for school. I had to get a job. I had to make it. I graduated from Texas A&M and M, and I joined the United States Army. I did it the same way that World War II guys did, and that's go to officer candidate school. And I was a platoon leader in Baghdad for a year. I was on an 11-man special forces type team in Mosul, living with the Iraqi infantry for a year.
Mm.
And I went to Hurricane Katrina support as well. And I was a captain in the Army. I got out of the Army, moved to New York City. I was in New York City for a couple of years. Then I was compelled to continue to serve something greater than myself. And I moved to Washington, D.C., and I was a federal employee. And I worked out of the Pentagon as a Pentagon official, working on economic development in the Middle East and Afghanistan, traveling to Afghanistan 16 times. Uh, I left DC and moved back to my home state of Texas, and I lived there for 4 years. But the 8 years that I was gone from New York City, the four in DC and the 4 years in Dallas, I was back in New York or New Jersey every single month on my own dime because I loved being in the Northeast. And a little over 8 years ago, I moved permanently to New Jersey, and I'm currently councilman in Chatham Borough. I've been in Chatham Borough the entire time, and that's my high level story. I've worked for three Fortune 100 companies. My expertise is in management and getting things done basically for big companies. Um, I chose to run because I deeply love this country, and I feel that we need elected leaders who care more about working for the American people than trying to get elected and maintaining their seats. And I feel we're in a very unique time in our history in which we need Democratic leaders who are focusing on just doing what's right, regardless if it's a politically good for them or not. On the day one of my campaign launch, I signed a pledge with the National Term Limits Organization, where I am pledging to support a constitutional amendment to institute congressional term limits on members of Congress because I
Mm.
think members of Congress need to go to Washington to work for the American people and not just sit there, 10, 20, 30 years. They need to be focused on getting results. And the results that I'm focused on, that my entire campaign is based upon, is making sure that we set things up for the American people to achieve the American dream. And I know the American dream is a very trendy thing right now for political folks to say. And to me, what the American dream is very simple. It's helping people who you never know that you're actually helping, which is that's what you do as a member of Congress. You help a lot of people. You don't even know all their names and their faces, but you know you're working hard to help people. But achieving that American dream is all economic based. It's all about the things in your life, to the journey you take in your life and making it more affordable. And that's another thing that's very trendy right now is talking about affordability. But you hear people talk about it, but you don't hear the leaders talk about specific things they're going to do to make things affordable. And if you go to my website, you can read all the details about how we're going to do that and with the specific legislation justinstrickland.com. But I'm going to give you an overview real quick of the main things we're going to fight for. And we're going to go to Washington, D.C. on day one to work for. And that is one, we're going to work to cap college tuition. College tuition is way too expensive. Young people are coming out of college with over $100,000 debt. When you have over $100,000 debt out of college, that's about a $900 a month, payment that you have to pay as soon as you get out of college, which means you can't save for, your next step in life. You can't save for cars, you can't save for houses, you can't save for starting a family, and you're crippled by that debt because we've told people as a society that you have to get a college education. And education is really good to have as well, but they're coming out with all this debt. So we're going to cap college tuition at all state level institutions because I think it's criminal that if a taxpayer pays for a state institution that somebody comes out with over $100,000 debt. But it's not just capping it. What it is we're going to part of the legislation is also instituting a cap on private loans. Right now, the average private loan is 9%, and it starts immediately as soon as you take out that loan. Federal loans, which people don't really know the details on, the most you can take out for 4 years is $56,000. So if someone's coming out with over $100,000 of loans, we'll just say it's 125. Majority of that is private loans. And those private loans are really what's killing people when it comes to being able to afford the next stage in their life. So we're going to focus on making sure that we cap that private loan interest rate at 7% so that people aren't crippled right out of college. Now, the other thing we're going to do is we're going to institute a piece of legislation that is to help families who have kids. Okay, I call it a child care coupon, in which if you're of a mom and a dad who's working, we're going to do a coupon that is up to $25,000 a year that you can give to your child care provider, and that child care provider gives that and cashes that into the federal government. It's not a tax incentive. It's not a tax break because tax incentives they're not immediate. You know, a lot of people don't have the money to float in order to get that tax incentive later. We want to be able to immediately give working parents a break in order so they can save for their houses and maybe potentially pay for an emergency like a car breaking down or a medical bill. Another thing that we're going to do is we're going to champion a public option. I was in DC when the ACA passed in 2010, and I was in the Democratic camp back in those days that was very pro public option. And the Democrats at the time said public option is too much. We got to take what we can get. So we're going to go with the ACA. Well, I want to say the same thing today that I said, 15 years ago, and that is the reason the public option is such a viable way to go is because we actually already have a public option in this country, and it's called the VA. The VA hospital and medical care, that's a public option. Veterans don't have to use it, but it's there for them if they need to use it. And if we have a public option, it'll serve as a form of competition for private insurance companies, and it'll keep your insurance premiums from skyrocketing the way we've seen them. And the idea that, oh, how can we pay for it? We got to remember it was not going to happen overnight. It'll be gradual. But most importantly, the thing to remember is that your current healthcare and insurance companies has to pay for profit. VA is not paying for profit. It's not paying for bonuses. It's not paying for it to be a commodity that people buy and sell on the stock market. We don't have to worry about that with a public option. So the cost is a lot cheaper. Okay. Another piece of policy that we're going to introduce and work on at the very beginning is we are going to institute policy that helps people buy homes because we hear about a lot about, housing is too expensive. It's hard for people to be able to buy a home. So rather than just talk about it, we're going to do something about it. And rather than just like focus on we need to build more homes, which in my opinion is not very much in the spirit of the Democratic Party. Because to me, when you talk about building homes and having developers build homes, that's focusing on somebody who's got a lot of money already who's going to profit off building these homes. Kind of like the New Jersey affordable housing law, in which it is a very pro-developer law. My proposal is that we're going to set up a federal program in which it's very similar to the VA loan program for homes, which if you qualify for a loan with your credit and such, you don't have to put 20% down on a home. The federal government will back that loan so that you don't have to put 20% down because in the state of New Jersey, the average house is $600,000 to $650,000. And if you had college loan debt, how are you going to save nearly $150,000 so you can put down a house payment. And I know people will say, well, you don't have to. Well, if you don't have to, and you put 5% down, then you're paying PMI, your private mortgage insurance. But if you have this program of mine that I'm going to introduce, you don't have to have PMI. And PMI on $600,000 is about an additional $400 a month on your mortgage. So we're attacking the idea of making it easier for people to buy homes by having this program. On the flip side, what about the supply? What are we doing about the supply? Part of that legislation also will be to make it illegal for hedge funds and corporate entities to purchase single family homes, because single family homes should be exactly what they are called, single family. They shouldn't be bought up by hedge funds to help a hedge fund make money. So we're gonna make that illegal. And additionally, if someone's got a lot of money and they're buying single family homes and they're leaving them empty, we're going to make it so that, we're going to tax those people who buy single family homes and leave them unoccupied, because it's not being utilized by the people who need to have the homes. So it'll increase the supply out there, which will drive down the cost. And on the ulterior, once people start buying more homes, it'll also make renting a lot cheaper because there'll be more supply of rentals available, which makes it easier for those people who come out of college if they want to rent. So we're very focused on affordability. I have specific policy that'll help people have more money in their pockets. But the last one I want to talk about is actually one that's very, very, near and dear to my heart, because I created it and came up with them on my own. And so I'm very proud of that. And that is Social Security. A lot of people who are younger don't realize that if you have a husband and a wife, and one of those partners passes, that you're going to lose one of those Social Securities immediately. You get the higher of the two, but upon the passing of that spouse, you only get one Social Security. So you just lost somebody that might have been with you for 50 years of your life. It's a horribly awful time in someone's life to deal with the loss of a loved one like that. Your entire reality is changing. And then all of a sudden, you're probably losing anywhere between $1,500 to $2,500 a month instantly. And we know property tax in New Jersey is high. So maybe you can't pay for your property tax now. Maybe, you rely on that Social Security to pay your rent. And all of a sudden, not only have you lost your loved one, but now you have to worry about how are you going to pay your bills? Where are you going to live? I just think that at that time in someone's life, when you're at your most vulnerable, we as a federal government need to do something to make sure that those people can transition into their new reality, and they have a time to grieve. And so we're going to introduce legislation that gives a 2-year grace period after that loved one has passed. So you still get both Social Securities, and you can then plan for your future. So those are just a few of my policies that are on my website, and they're in much more greater detail than I just described them. But I bring those up because, in my opinion, you need leaders that are going to go to Washington to work for you, and not just talk about how bad Donald Trump is or how bad corruption is. Because in my opinion, that's the baseline for being in the seat. You don't get points for saying how bad Trump is or how much corruption is. We all know that. You all know that. You want to know what I'm actually going to do to help you and your loved ones to have a better life, what actual policies I'm going to fight for. And that's why it's so important that we have these actual plans that we're going to fight for everyone in New Jersey's 11th district and the whole country for that matter.